Under the lining, cloth tells on you. People think fabric is passive, something you drape over a life like a polite napkin. It is. Wool remembers heat and hesitation. Silk records an argument in how it creases. A hem will keep a secret if you sew it correctly, but it will never forget the order of your decisions. When I steam a jacket, I watch the truth lift out in waves. My name is Ari. I am a tailor with a room over a cobblestone lane where the street still believes in evening. My table is nicked and burnished by years of chalk lines and sharp choices. The shears sleep point inward like well-trained dogs. I keep a row of brushed wooden forms in the window so passers-by can witness how a body becomes an idea. People come to me with sentences they want to wear. My job is to give their verb structure. She arrived on a Wednesday with rain on her hair and an apology shaped like a smile. The bell on my door cleared its throat the way old brass does, and she stepped inside without asking if she belonged. "You must be Ari," she said, and looked around the room as if it had told her a story before I had the chance. "And you've measured me already," I said, because it is a relief when the obvious is admitted early. Her mouth tilted. "Rhea Hale," she said, offering her hand. "I need you to fix something that doesn't want to be improved." Hale. In this city, the name lives on gallery plaques and charitable galas where the wine has better diction than the hosts. Her husband, Bastian, builds the kind of buildings that make other buildings adjust their posture. I'd seen their photographs. His tuxedo like a declaration, her dress like a decision. She set a garment bag on the table and pulled a dinner jacket out the way careful people handle light. It was a black pique lapel in a cloth with a hand like fog. "It was made for him last season," she said. "It refuses to behave this one. The sleeve fights, the vent sulks. He says it's the tailor. I say it's the life." I put the jacket on a stand and walked around it, fingers warming to the basted seams, eyes finding the places where the body and the story had changed their agreement. The right shoulder had learned a new habit, small forward pitch, as if he'd started leaning into rooms he didn't intend to apologize to. The left pocket had been opened with improvised enthusiasm. The hem felt heavy for no reason that tailoring could endorse. "Leave it with me," I said. "I'll persuade it without breaking its pride." She watched my hand settle the cloth. The room narrowed kindly around us. "My husband is impossible to measure," she said, too casually to be casual. "You'll like him anyway, everyone does. It's how he keeps score." "I don't grade on charm," I said, "only on spine." Rhea smiled like a woman who has stopped making excuses for teeth. She wrote her number on the back of a card that already had my name on it. "Call me," she said, "before you cut." After she left, I turned the jacket inside out and followed the map only tailors and thieves know how to read. Threads tell you where a hand has been. Under the facing, someone had stitched a line that didn't belong to my trade, too tight, too mean. It ran along the hem like an impatient vein. I unpicked it carefully. Something small and hard slid into my palm and tapped my skin like a punctuation mark. It was a micro SD card, black as a swallowed word. "I have rules, and I keep them in chalk on the wall where steam can soften them if I need to forgive myself later. The first rule is speak before you cut. The second is don't become the thing you fix." I stood with that bit of plastic on my tongue like a lie I hadn't told yet, and felt the room negotiate with my better self. I called Rhea. She answered on the second ring and made my name sound like a plan. "Before," I said, "your husband's hem had an appetite. I found something it should not digest." "Show me," she said, without asking me to lie for either of us. Her townhouse was a poem about successful restraint. The piano in the corner looked like it remembered being touched properly. She led me to a small room that had been forgiven for being white by the art on the walls. I put the card on the table between us and waited while she decided what kind of woman she would be tonight. She slid the card into a reader as if it might demand a signature. The screen filled with dates and files named by a machine that didn't care who it was betraying. She opened one without flinching. A hotel room. A woman whose face was too proud to pretend to be a secret. Bastian, younger by 2 drinks, his mouth on a decision he didn't own. Their conversation was unremarkable except for how perfectly it fit the life he sold. He was generous where it cost nothing. She was kind where it would never be recorded. Then a second file, a third. Receipts, screenshots. A scan of a letter between lawyers not yet signed. Language about asset protection disguised as a prenup amendment. A kindness that sounded like a cage. Rhea sat very still while the truth rearranged the furniture under her feet. Then she reached for the laptop and closed it gently, as if it had fallen asleep on the couch. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said, "but neither was I." "I can pretend I didn't," I said. "Can you?" she asked, not accusatory, honest. "I can't." "We can put it back where we found it," I said, because sometimes the kindest thing is to let a man walk into his own trap wearing exactly what he chose. "We can," she said. Then she looked at me the way a woman looks at a door she hasn't decided whether to open. "But I won't be the kind of woman who learns something and calls it an accident. My grandmother taught me to sew by making me speak the line before I cut it. Say it out loud, then make it true." "We share grandmothers," I said. She poured 2 inches of wine into 2 thin glasses and carried one to me like a treaty. "Do you sleep with clients, Ari?" she asked, as if she were asking about a seam allowance. "I try not to," I said. "I prefer to keep my hands and my promises in the same room." "Good," she said, and stepped close enough for me to see the place on her lip where her lipstick forgot to be brave. "Then don't. Not until I have a plan that doesn't turn you into an alibi." We stood that close for a long, polite moment that felt like breathing underwater. I put my free hand on the table so it wouldn't think it had been invited to say something I wasn't ready to hear. She smiled as if we had both passed a test. "I need you to make him a tuxedo he will love more than he loves mirrors," she said. "He won't resist if it flatters him. There's a gallery opening next week. There will be cameras pretending to be art. I want you there. Not to humiliate him, to catch him being himself while the room is listening." "I'm a tailor," I said, "not a microphone." "You're a man who listens professionally," she said. "Make me a pocket inside a pocket. I'll decide what lives there." Bastian Hale was the kind of handsome that doesn't apologize, and the kind of client who believes flattery is a measurement. He arrived late to his first fitting, peeled off a jacket that cost too much to hang badly, and shook my hand like a friendly subpoena. "You're the magician," he said, letting me lift his arm and circle his bicep with the tape. "My wife swears by you. She swears by very few things." "I'm an honest liar," I said, marking the chalk at the back seam where men hide their sins. "I tell the cloth what it wants to hear until it believes it." He laughed like a man who rewards charm when it's inexpensive. His phone vibrated on the table. He glanced. The ghost cologne of another room lived on his sleeve, overly dry woods, a synthetic musk that thought it was clean because it was loud. I pretended to notice nothing. Tailoring is a religion of discretion, but silence isn't the same as approval. I cut a tuxedo that made him look like a plan. Midnight wool with a touch of stretch so it could forgive him for leaning on it. Peak lapels that could punctuate a speech. The lines loved him in ways he hadn't earned. I basted a hidden welt behind the inside chest pocket and left it open like a mouth that trusted the right word. When he left, I put my chalk down and breathed the kind of breath you take after carrying a piano up unforgiving stairs. Rhea texted, before, I want to follow him without looking like a woman who follows. I need you to be the seam I disappear into. After hours, I wrote back, I'll be your lining. 2 nights later, we met at the back entrance to a building the city pretends not to know, discreet apartments above a lane that takes itself seriously. I had recognized the logo stamped on the plastic sleeve of a key card I'd found in Bastian's old jacket pocket when I was hemming it for another life. It wasn't much of a leap. Men are lazier in their rituals than they want to believe. We climbed quiet stairs that smelled like overpriced cleanliness. On the landing, the door to 4C was cracked, a sliver of yellow light turning the hallway into eavesdropping. Rhea put 2 fingers on my wrist. Her skin was cool and impatient. We stood without breathing while the room inside confessed itself. After the gala, a woman said, soft as a threat, sign it and we stop asking questions. I'll sign it when the press release lands, Bastian said. You don't rush a hand that's been paid to be steady. I set my phone on the floor and slid it toward the door until it could drink the air. Rhea watched me with the gratitude of a person who refuses to beg in public. When the conversation mentioned accounts and a timeline that could not be defended as mere friendship, she nodded once. We left like the good owners of a secret. I'll let my lawyer do the shouting, she said on the street, wind turning her hair into statements. You'll come to the opening and stand where the cameras can catch your innocence. Innocence isn't my trade, I said. It is tonight, she said, and pressed her mouth to mine like a clause in a contract. It tasted like restraint and the end of restraint. We didn't undress each other. We discovered where we fit without making a mess of it, and when we stopped, we were better at standing. She put her forehead to mine and spoke into my mouth the way people speak to someone who has decided to tell the truth with them. Thank you for saying it before, she whispered. The gallery opening was the kind of event where money dresses up as taste and taste pretends not to recognize itself. Rhea wore black with the sort of back that made the air remember it was allowed to touch. Bastian wore the tuxedo like a good lie. He shook hands as if he were blessing commerce and introduced me as the artist who works in thread. I smiled with my teeth like a decent man. At 9, a reporter asked a question about legacy that made the chandeliers proud. Bastian opened his mouth and said words that were at once careful and careless, a long sentence about stewardship and the future of endowments. At 9:15, a process server walked through the crowd with the focus of a man who knows the difference between art and paperwork. He said Bastian's name. The room experienced silence the way a gallery experiences a fire alarm, faint excitement behind the horror. Rhea didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She took the envelope, slipped it into her clutch like a woman who keeps receipts, and kept smiling with a face that had graduated from needing permission. I stood near the bar and learned the intimate smell of a narrative-changing clothes. After, the city needed to be walked, so we walked it. She took my arm as if it were the most practical thing to do with what was in her hands. We ended up at my shop because rooms with honest tables are better than rooms with expensive chairs. She sat on the cutting bench and swung her feet like a child who has survived school. I made tea in the iron kettle I used to convince Wool to stop lying. Will he forgive me for catching him? She asked, curious. Or will he punish me for learning the language he speaks when he forgets to perform? He'll say the tuxedo betrayed him, I said. Men like that outsource their guilt to objects with better tailoring. She laughed and the room lifted its head. I would like to betray him a little more before I'm finished, she said. You already have, I said, and set the cup down by her knee. You kept your promise to yourself louder than his to the room. She slid off the bench and stood between my shears and my chest like a person who knows the difference a hand makes when it isn't pretending to be innocent. Do your rules allow you to sleep with me now? She asked. They require me to say it before I do it, I said. I want you. Then take me, she said, without turning me into a headline. We were exact. I won't turn us into a list. Cloth rustled the way cloth does when it knows it's being useful. The mirror in the corner minded its own business. She learned the weight of my shoulder the way a seam learns a curve. When she came apart, she gripped the table and didn't apologize to it. When I followed, the room stayed where it was. We put ourselves back together with the competence of people who don't need to be told how. She left before morning softened the edges of the alley. She texted me from the car. The museum will have its wing. The lawyers will have their sport. I will have a lease with bad light and a door I lock from the inside because I like the sound. Keep the tuxedo pattern. Burn the hem. I kept the pattern because good work is allowed to survive bad context. I burned the bit of thread, watched it curl like a small dark thing that had finished its job. I put the micro SD card in an envelope addressed to a woman Rhea trusted more than she trusted headlines. Bastian stopped by once, weeks later, in a suit that fit less well than his story. He shook my hand as if we were old accomplices. Hell of a stitch, he said of the tuxedo, like a man complimenting the engineering of the cage he built for himself. I'll send my new measurements. I only take clients who know the difference between a seam and an excuse, I said gently. He didn't understand. That's not a moral, it's a symptom. Sometimes late, I run my palms over the worn map of the cutting table and think about the sentences we choose to wear. I think about Rhea's back where it stopped pretending to need support, about the weight a hem can hide and the bravery of an opened vent. I think about how honesty isn't a virtue so much as a craft. You plan it, you pin it, you sew it down, you press it, you try it on, and then you adjust until you can breathe without feeling where the stitches sit. Cloth tells on you, so do hands if you let them. And somewhere in a room with bad light and a good lock, a woman sleeps with her windows open because she chose the air herself. The rest, gala photographs, murmured gossip, signatures on paper that used to feel like a favor, will yellow or not. The suit I made lives on a hanger that reminds itself not to judge. My shears face inward. The chalk waits. And under the lining, where no one looks unless they intend to, there's enough space for the truth to lie flat.